Hi everybody, welcome to this People Before Profit broadcast, and this is a weekly event. This week we're looking at the issues around maternity leave and childcare in the era of COVID. And most of you may have noticed over the last few weeks that it's quite normal in modern society, but women seem to have been left behind again, particularly mothers, and indeed in this case their children and their babies. The issue of childcare and the sort of fractured and privatised nature of childcare in this country has really been exposed for the disaster that it is during this COVID crisis. But we also had a further issue that emerged quite strongly because of a magnificent campaign by a group of young mothers who organised themselves under the banner of Extend Maternity Leave 2020. And the reason for it will be explained by one of our speakers, probably our next speaker, I think, in the lineup, Solan. But it's a very, very important issue because young mothers on maternity leave now, or new mothers, I should say, on maternity leave now during COVID, experience a huge amount of challenges, as do their babies and their families. And they really are very fearful and often very stressed out about the idea of being forced to return to work because maternity leave may run out before we're out of the worst of this crisis. And given that we're only into stage 2, I think this should have serious consideration by the state. Now, just to say from my perspective as a TD with People Before Profit and Dáil Éireann, I very much embraced the campaign that the women were engaged in, and I took it as a sort of a opportunity whenever we had the various ministers in front of us to really push them on the idea of the extension of maternity leave for the people who have, who are out on maternity leave now and who have been forced to return to work. And we've been through various ministers with this issue, from social protection to finance and to justice. I have a reply to a question from the Minister for Justice that came in the last day or two. In fact, it came in yesterday, and it isn't going to make us very happy at all, but I'll go through it as we go through the meeting. But first of all, we have a series of speakers lined up, and really interesting speakers. Paula Solan is from the campaign I mentioned, Maternity Leave 2020. Emma Hendrick is a young activist with People Before Profit in the Tallaght area, and also a young and a new mother who's facing the challenges of childcare and accessing childcare in this society. And we have Stephen Loyal, who's a UCD academic and an activist in People Before Profit, but he's also helped to draft the People Before Profit childcare policy. And I'm very happy that we've been joined by another young woman activist from Northern Ireland who runs a campaign on childcare in the north, Ciara Fitzpatrick. So I'll take us all. If you want to change the order, that's fine. But I propose that we talk to Paula first. And as I said, Paula Solan has been one of the leading lights in the campaign. So Paula, I didn't describe your campaign in full in relation to the petition, you guys coming to the Dáil, the interaction you've had with TDs and senators, but I'd leave that to you to do. Is that okay?
Thanks, Brid. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's what I'll try to explain now. So, yeah, I've been involved for the last, I suppose, couple of months. It's hard to keep track during these times of how long it's been, actually. But this campaign was spearheaded by a friend of mine now, Agnes Graulska, and I hadn't met Agnes before. She actually reached out to me on Facebook through one of the kind of mother and baby groups on Facebook and asked me if I wouldn't mind starting to share the petition. And as we chatted a bit more about it, I was very, obviously, it replied to me and a lot of my kind of friends locally as well who've recently had babies. And it was, a cause that was very close to my heart, and I wanted to help out as much as I could. So there is a group of, I suppose, 20 mothers behind this. We haven't, well, I suppose before last Thursday, we hadn't met face to face. And when I talk about on Thursday, that was the day that we met Bríd in front of the Dáil and handed over the petition, which at the time had just over 25,000 signatures. supporting our petition to have a temporary extension to maternity leave and to maternity benefit. And Bríd has been so helpful and so supportive to us during the time in trying to get this petition, publicised, and to get the government to really pay attention to it, because I suppose where we started off first was trying to publicise the petition, but also trying to contact all of our elected representatives to try and get them to take it seriously and understand what it is that we were looking for and why we were looking for it. We weren't getting great responses. We were getting responses all right, but mostly along the lines of, yes, we understand it must be difficult for you not being able to attend mother and baby groups. Must be a very different maternity leave than what you had expected. And absolutely it is. But I suppose where I'm coming from, I work full time up until this maternity leave. My youngest son was born in January, and I suppose the beginning of the maternity leave was normal in the sense that the first month or so you really don't go out of the house very much. But I suppose really by the time we were starting to see a little bit of normality with a third baby, that was when lockdown hit. And I suppose since then we haven't seen our families since then. My husband and I are not from Dublin originally. We've made Dublin our home now, but our families are in Wexford and in Meath respectively, so we haven't seen them since the beginning of lockdown. And I suppose one of the things that have been highlighted amongst the mothers that we've been working with to try and raise support for our campaign is the isolation. There's a popular phrase that it takes a village to raise a child. And that's certainly the case. That's what we're missing. We're missing our family. We're missing friends. We're missing the advice of normal groups such as breastfeeding groups or mother and baby groups that are held by public health nurses in the area. Those are all cancelled. We're missing just to be able to talk with people and find out, is this normal for my baby? When it's slightly different when it's number 3. You've seen a lot of these things before, but for new mothers, I can't imagine what this maternity leave must be like for them, because this is my 3rd maternity leave. I have 2 older kids who are 5 and 4, and this is completely different, and it's been the most challenging by far. And even at that, I have some online kind of contacts and everything as well, and only for that I would be lost. But I've made those up over the course of the previous 2 maternity leaves, so that's been a real challenge for us. Otherwise, I know that Emma is going to talk a bit more about childcare, so I won't talk too much about it. But it's a real concern of mine. I have 2 other kids. They were both attending the same childcare facility. With my older son is in school. He goes there afterwards as well, and we're just not sure, are they going to be able to be taken back by the same facility or not? Will they have the space given the new restrictions and everything, and the new guidance that has to be put in place? Will it be safe? Is it safe for me to send them? Or what are we going to be bringing home to our youngest baby, who has a very immature immune system like all babies? I guess I believe that the creche, they're a wonderful bunch of people, and I think they'll do their absolute best, but there's nothing to say that the parents sending their kids in will all follow the rules either. So that is a concern for us. I suppose going back then to some of the other challenges that we have noted within our group and within our campaign was the lack of support services. So developmental checks have been cancelled by public health nurses. They're only starting to come back now. We've had people as well tell us some very sad stories about just being denied medical appointments because they're deemed as not urgent. In one case, one of the mothers spoke about having suffered severe mastitis because her GP refused to give her an appointment, feeling that it wasn't urgent, and it ended her breastfeeding journey as well. And that can often cause a lot of problems for mothers with feelings of guilt, once the breastfeeding journey ends before they're ready for it to end. We've had stories of people where their vaccinations haven't been happening. Luckily, my own doctor has seen the value of vaccinations and has continued with the schedule, but that's not the case across all doctors across the country. We've also been told of there are no physio appointments, really. Some physios are trying to do their best online for mothers who are postpartum, but that's an important step for mothers for recovery as well, to be able to access services such as physiotherapy, but also for their babies too. We've been told about mothers, there's somebody in the group that's working on it, that they need to have hip x-rays and on ultrasounds, and they've been cancelled as well. And the challenge with that is that the longer the babies are left with possible hip dysplasia, there's more likelihood that they're going to have surgery and be in a cast for a very long period of time, at a time when they should be being more active and should be starting to get up and around developmentally as well. So I think, you know, I've covered sort of most of the topics, and most of the reason why we got together and decided that we'd had enough and we wanted to make sure that this petition was being seen. Bríd has been brilliant in order of guiding us as well, because like I say, we're working mothers, but you know, we're not experts in government or how to get legislation through or how to even get this in front of the government. But on Thursday last, 4 of us met Bríd outside Leinster House, and we presented the petition to her there. And we were blown away actually by the support that we received, and the publicity that we received, you know, following that as well. And, you know, I think we've probably seen another 2,000 signatures since then as well. But as I said, it's something that's hugely important. We want to go back to work. You know, we're talking about people who are and were up to very recently working and paying taxes just like everybody else. Unfortunately, the burden of childcare, it falls to mothers often as well. Not saying the fathers aren't also involved, but it's usually the mothers who are pushed out of the workforce. And we don't want to be pushed out of the workforce. We want to be able to go back fit and healthy, not burnt out, and to be able to take up our jobs again, because we know it's going to be important for the recovery of the country as well at the end of all of this. What we're asking for is just a little bit more time to make sure that we have the right childcare in place, that it's safe for our children to go there. And, you know, and also that we're people too, we need to be looked after as well, and to make sure that we're fully recovered from the pregnancies and childbirth, and, you know, for our physical and mental health.
Okay, Paula, that was very, very good, very insightful, and I think for lots of people listening in will really have explained why you have such a good case. Unfortunately, no matter how good your case is, it doesn't always force governments and political parties to listen to you. I'm aware that there may be a lot of women listening in, young mothers listening in, who are confused about what we're trying to do here, because there was 2 parallel attempts. One was the petition, which Paula mentioned, signed now by nearly 27,000 of our citizens. And parallel to that, I was circulating a motion around the Dáil to get as many deputies to sign it, which basically called for a 3-month extension of maternity leave and benefit in light of COVID. And that in itself, that demand in itself, got simultaneously confused with a separate demand in regards to women workers returning from maternity leave who weren't able to access the wage subsidy scheme because their average pay was being judged on what they received for January and February, which is what's contained in the legislation. And when they returned to work, they were on very, very low pay, because what they were getting January, February was the minimum maternity benefit. And under pressure, the government put a change that they're going to retrospectively legislate for into the legislation around COVID payments, and in particular the wage subsidy scheme, to allow those women returning from maternity benefit to access the wage subsidy scheme. And my argument was simply to say to all of the deputies, and particularly the ministers, if you do it for one cohort of parents to get them equality and justice, then surely we could retrospectively legislate for the extension, a temporary extension just for COVID, of the maternity leave and benefit. Now, just for the benefit of those listening in who are affected by this, I want to say that there is a big, big difference between the presentation of that petition to the Dáil and subsequently to Leo Varadkar, who did say, by the way, last week that he would have an answer for us this week. I haven't got that answer yet, but I have one from Charlie Flanagan, which will take me a couple of minutes to read out. But there is a difference between that petition and the motion that I am circulating. The motion that I am circulating has been completed now by all Sinn Féin, all People Before Profit Solidarity, all the Greens, all the Social Democrats, and all the Labour Party, and a smattering of independents. Those who clearly haven't signed it are Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And I know that there are women out there really pressurising their local TDs to sign it. But please stop worrying or fretting about the motion and whether it has months listed in it or not, because the motion in itself has no legal standing. All it is an instrument to try and push the government to act on this. At the moment, technically, we can't put any bills, any amendments, any motions before the Dáil. This is just an instrument of pressure that we have decided to use, which is getting by and large a good response, except for the two major parties. We keep working on it, but don't worry, I'm not going to tie, if the wording needs to be changed, it can, in terms of the months and the dates, and I'm not going to tie anybody to a commitment on anything they don't want to commit to, or we're not going to try and exclude any mothers out there. Anyway, just to keep us up to date, and before I ask you our next speaker, the essence of Charlie Flanagan's reply to us from last week is, I am conscious of demands on parents at this time, and I hope that additional measures to support working parents that I have introduced in recent years, including the new parent leave scheme and the extension of parental leave, are helping to ease some of these demands. In addition to maternity leave, each parent may also avail of 2 weeks parents' leave during the first year of a child's life, and may qualify for parents' benefit during this period. Parental leave is also available, which entitles parents to take unpaid leave from work to spend time looking after their children. Parents can take up to 22 weeks of parental leave for each eligible child before their 12th birthday. So I guess the answer from Charlie is no, because he hasn't even addressed the question of the petition or the demands that we are trying to make on him and on Leo Varadkar. So the answer from him is no. We'll await the answer from Leo Varadkar. If I don't have something by tomorrow, I won't get a platform to raise with him tomorrow, but I will send him a formal letter tomorrow. If anybody wants to ask questions on this, will you please type them into the live comments box, and I will take them as we come across them. And I hope that clarifies the situation. But if you want to continue to email me privately, that's also very fair enough. So I'll move on to our next speaker, Stephen Loyal, who's an academic in UCD, but who's also been involved in writing up the childcare policy for People Before Profit. And you will speak for a few minutes, Stephen, about 3-5 minutes?
About 5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Okay, thanks for asking me. We could start by just saying that childcare in Ireland is in crisis. Now, the word crisis has become increasingly overused, and it's sort of lost a lot of its meaning. We talk about, a crisis with COVID virus. We talk about financial crisis, but there is, to some extent, a profound crisis which has affected the childcare sector prior to COVID. I mean, now it's even worse. But there's been decades of chronic underinvestment in the sphere of childcare in Ireland. I want to talk about 4 areas very briefly, which highlight this crisis. Firstly, in terms of investment, Ireland currently invests 0.2% of GDP in childcare, and this is the lowest in the EU, one of the lowest in the developed countries in the world. You can contrast this, for example, with Sweden, which invests 1.9%, and Denmark, which is seen as having one of the leading childcare systems in the world, which invests 2.3% of its GDP. Now, this is connected then to a second issue, which are the incredibly high fees which are charged in Ireland. The average cost is said to be 750 euros. But there's big differences according to region. So, in Dublin, for example, you'd be lucky to pay under 1,000 euros for a full-time place in a creche. I have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old, and we certainly faced that when we were trying to go to work and get some childcare. Now, Again, the costs in Ireland are one of the highest in developed countries. So in Ireland, you're easily paying 3 times more than most European countries would do for childcare. And this leads to the third area, which sort of relates to this crisis, and this is the providers. There is a sense that creche providers are making lots of money. The majority are private in the private sector. Ireland has a very market-oriented system. Leave everything to the market. The state shouldn't interfere. But recent surveys have shown that even providers find running creches financially unsustainable. One report found that some made a profit between €266 a year to €16,000 a year. And they're also faced by a highly bureaucratic system. They have to report to 3 or 4 agencies at least: Tulsa, Pobal, Department of Education, various local councils. So it's a very rigid system in which even providers are unwilling to continue to provide services because of the bureaucratic and the financial costs. And finally, there's a problem with staff. Many people working creche services have qualifications, college qualifications, some have degrees, but at the same time they receive some of the lowest wages in the country. The majority earn €12.55 an hour, and a large number of being paid barely over the minimum wage. And the failure of providing a sustainable living wage for many of these workers means that there's an incredibly high turnover in the industry of staff. Many leave for better paid jobs. Something like 25% in 2019 left the area to find better paid jobs commensurate with their qualifications. This, of course, then leads in turn to higher adult educated child ratios in the area. There's also the problem that the ECHA scheme, the Early Childhood Care and Education Programme, only runs for 38 weeks. And in the recent protests many childcare workers had in February, there were placards which read paid 38 weeks, pay bills 52 weeks. And so many of these workers, they get no pension, they have no sick pay, they have no maternity pay, and they're on insecure contracts. So it's because of these sort of 4 factors which I think come together to make what I called a crisis apparent. Now, childcare in Ireland is important for not just the psychosocial development of children. Most research has shown that children learn most or acquire most knowledge before they hit the age of 3. And Ireland itself is a country which is often seen as child-friendly, placing a high premium on children's welfare. But the state, for some reason, probably to do with the fact that childcare is often related as it's a very gendered and feminized area, seen as to be the responsibility of women, put a very low priority on the area. So, given these costs, given these issues, what is the effect? Well, there's effects both on working class families. Again, because given the high costs, many cannot afford to send one child. People often talk about having another mortgage, let alone 2 children into the creche system. There's also an effect not only on working class families but also on women. Women are expected as child carers. There's a very gendered value system in Irish society, which is gradually changing but not changing fast enough. But also more women in Ireland have part-time jobs. Even those on full-time jobs are paid less wages than men, and have less promotion prospects, and many have less jobs in the more influential positions in society, including in powerful political positions. Now, the new coalition has said that it's going to reduce costs for parents, and it's going to provide a cap on fees. But it mentioned nothing was mentioned about increasing investment, which presupposes that these policies can be put in place. So what the coalition are merely giving us are simply words, empty words. Without increased investment, there will be no fundamental change in the childcare situation in this country. What we need is a fundamental restructuring of the childcare system as a whole, a holistic approach. There's over 200,000 children in the creche system and over 30,000 workers. And even according to the recent childcare barometer, 67% believe that childcare should be available for free, as it is in Denmark and in certain parts of Germany, for example, in Berlin. This requires a universal childcare system, a public system, not a private system. One which requires high investment, which is acquired through direct taxation. Only then will we be able to get out of this crisis and provide a high quality and sustainable system service for future generations. Okay, that's just what I wanted to know.
Thank you, Stephen. That's very, very good, very, very insightful. And I think what you've talked about there shows really that the COVID crisis has put a spotlight on the crisis in childcare, because it has been a real bugbear for anybody who is an essential worker. We've seen nurses, doctors, care workers, cleaners in hospitals stress really big time about this issue during the worst of the crisis, but it's now obviously become a huge issue as we try to open up the economy again. Now, we've been talking a lot about, and I suppose rightly so, about these 2 points of pressure in the southern state, the Irish Free State, so to speak, but we do have somebody here joining us from the north, Ciara Fitzpatrick, who's a childcare campaigner in Northern Ireland. Thank you very much for joining us, Ciara. Whereabouts are you from?
I'm actually from County Derry, but living in Belfast at the minute.
Great, we cover all the angles from one side to the other. So thanks very much. Will you speak to us then about the issues that you are facing? Probably quite similar.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for having me. Our childcare system is also in crisis, and I don't need to repeat exactly what Stephen has said, but the exact same applies here. Although we've got the added complication of a fractured political system that struggles to come to agreement on controversial issues, and one controversial issue at the minute really seems to be childcare. I am having a wee bit of a chuckle to myself that I'm being referred to as a childcare activist and campaigner. I'm a bit of an accidental activist, to be honest. My usual area of interest, I'm a lecturer, and my usual area of interest is social security and the welfare state. And of course, this is an important part of that nexus. But it's really, I'm really a campaigner as a mother, a wee bit like Paula, and I want to send solidarity to her and all the mothers that are campaigning for the extension of maternity leave. Basically, I had just gone back from maternity leave when the pandemic hit. My little son had just been in childcare for 2 weeks when suddenly we were all put into lockdown. And I just started a new job, and my husband's working full-time as well. So we are currently juggling the challenges of full-time childcare with full-time work, and we're finding it very difficult. And last week, it really struck a chord when the government in the north announced that they would be opening all non-essential retail. Yet they had not even addressed the issue of childcare. So there had been absolutely no public discussion about it at all, or no indication as to what the roadmap for opening childcare settings was going to be. So really, that's what kind of got me to take action, and myself, along with a colleague, wrote a letter to the ministers, and we sent it to the papers, and it ended up getting quite a bit of coverage. And it's probably because there has been such a dearth of public information on the issue and of public discussion on the issue. And we outlined all of our concerns, and our main concerns are obviously that the expectation that families should work full-time while carrying out full-time childcare is just untenable. And also, if the government are seeking to open up the economy a massive part of that is ensuring that there is appropriate and sustainable childcare in place for those parents who wish to go back to work and for who it's safe for them to do so. Obviously, we're finding it tough working from home, but we know that there's people who have much harder decisions to make, those who are now being asked to return to work, those non-essential retailers, and now those who are going to be working in the hospitality industry, as well as those working in construction, have all been asked to return to work, and there is still no clear picture on how they're going to access childcare. So again, we wanted to emphasise that it's going to be low-income families, ethnic minorities, and especially lone parents who are really going to struggle and have to make difficult decisions, i.e. asking parents who are sometimes shielding as to whether or not they can look after their children. Statistics suggest that about 56% of families in the north rely on a mix of informal and formal childcare. And at the minute, there's no way for them to access that informal childcare because of the current restrictions due to COVID. They may be expected now to try and access formal childcare, and the cost is just a massive barrier for many people. Similar to the south, we face the highest childcare costs in Europe also. We are looking at between £800 and £1,000 per month for one child. And it's just not accessible, which is why so many people rely on informal childcare mechanisms. I would also say, with my social welfare hat on, that there are some subsidies, I suppose, available through the universal credit system, which is the new benefit system, but actually trying to work out what you're entitled to and getting access to that system is incredibly difficult. It is really, really complex, and many people are missing out because A, they can't work it out, and B, the other major problem with it is that they have to pay a month in advance before they're able to claim any entitlement. And we're actually an outlier in the rest of the UK because England and Wales are actually providing 30 hours of free childcare to 3 and 4 year olds. But because we have had a complete political hiatus for 2 years, we have absolutely no childcare strategy to speak of. And there has been one sitting on the shelf for 10 years, but there has been failure to agree on it. So it is just a massive mess. Politicians, since we brought much needed attention to this issue last week, they have been engaging with us. They have been saying that they want to do something, but they are not able to provide any clarity on what they're going to do. They made a bizarre announcement last week that they would open community centres and church halls to facilitate childcare. However, they did not provide any detail as to who would, for example, supervise these settings. Would they be able to be full-time, part-time, and what the protocol would be. It was particularly bizarre because we have obviously fully equipped creches and childminders who would very much like to get back to work, but they cannot because of some of the COVID restrictions. So it's just an absolute melting pot at the minute, and everybody is just seeking clarity, and at the minute there is none. So we are just going to keep pushing. I think that my ask, or our ask, is for an urgent childcare strategy which will provide a sustainable future for both parents but also providers who are really going to be on their knees financially. As Stephen outlined there, they are not sustainable businesses in a lot of parts, especially in rural areas, and I know that an awful lot are looking at maybe closing their doors, which will lead to obviously a lot of job losses for childcare workers. So yeah, that's my take on it, and I have got very passionate about it just over the last few weeks, and I am committed to keep pushing and to keep pressure and change.
Well done, Ciara, and that was very insightful. I didn't realise that the crisis in childcare in Northern Ireland was probably because of the political hiatus, as you described it, probably nearly worse than the prospects that we're facing here, although very, very similar. And thank you for that. Just to say to anybody who's watching, If you have any questions or comments for any of our speakers, or want to make a short statement or something, please feel free to put your comments, your questions in our live comment box, and I will get to them. Now, our last but not least speaker is Emma Hendrick, a woman I know very well. She's a community activist, a representative for people before profit in the Tala area, and is passionate about the issues around childcare, maternity leave, and all to do with women's rights and how women's needs are neglected in our society. So Emma, do you want to give us your take on the discussion? Okay, can you hear us, Emma? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
We hear you now.
Perfect. Sorry about that. I was on mute. No, just to preface that, normally when I start talking at Zoom meetings or anything like this, my 2-year-old comes running in and screaming for Peppa Pig to be on. So that might happen at this point. Hopefully not. So I just want to start first by saying thanks to Bríd for asking me to speak, and also thanks to Paula and the 25,000 women who brought that petition forward and signed it. And it's given us this opportunity here now to have the conversation about maternity leave and childcare provisions in Ireland, because it's often forgotten about. Historically in Ireland, we haven't had a great record of looking after women and children. And that's a lot to do with how the nature of the state has been set up. Instead of proper welfare system in the state, we got a lowly piece of the pie in the form of charity from the Catholic Church. You know, the Irish State looked to them to run our primary schools and run our hospitals. And because they ran our primary schools and hospitals, they had an awful lot of power and an awful lot of influence. And they made sure the traditional ideals of the family, you know, were enforced in legislation in Ireland. And it led to some horrific atrocities like the mother and baby homes and the Magdalene laundries. And I suppose one of the stark reminders of the negative influence of the Catholic Church in our history was when they rallied against Noel Brown's mother and baby schemes that would have given free medical care to women and children. You know, so they reinforced the ideas that women's place is in the home and women shouldn't look to the state for care, and their role was to bring up children in a private setting. And with COVID-19, that has all been highlighted so much more. You know, in society, traditional capitalist society, women have been the producers of the next generation of workers. And as the fight for equality started, women started to work outside the home as well. But unfortunately, the responsibility of raising and caring for children still primary, you know, falls to women. And when COVID happened and workplaces were shut down and paid employment was moved into the home, coronavirus magnified, you know, how much work women, unpaid work women do have to do at home, and the sexism in society. You know, women suddenly became full-time childcare providers while working at their paid employment, you know, caterers, making sure that older children were entertained and kept safe. And then they also became formal educators and took on the teaching role as well. With no social supports and no wider community to support them as well, it really brought us back to, you know, a woman being in her home and being the main responsibility of having the children to look after. It made it particularly difficult for women that were mothers of special needs children, because there was no SNAs there was no one to help take the burden. You weren't allowed any outside carers into your home to help you, so you didn't get any respite as such. Also with single mothers, inequality was highlighted, and unfortunately domestic violence rose by 30%. So these are just all effects that the COVID crisis has had on women. And when we're looking forward to how we leave this crisis, you know, with a new government forming, we need to be asking and demanding what we want. So if we look back at the repeal campaign in 2018, you know, the word that was bandied around there the whole time was choice. And we wanted choice over what we do with our bodies, but we also want a choice in, if we do decide to have children, choice that we can, you know, raise these children how we want them to be raised. And that means that being able to provide for them and being able to provide effective childcare. And at the moment, you know, a lot of women don't know where they're going to be regarding childcare going forward, or where we are at the moment. You know, as Paula said, are her children going to be able to return to the childcare that they already have? A lot of providers aren't going to be opening back up. We're in a whole new, it's going to be a whole new reality for so many people. And, you know, we keep hearing the whole time, you know, how Ireland cherishes their children, but we really aren't cherishing our children. You know, what we are looking at is for women to go out to work and to pay privately for someone to mind their children. And as we've been told by two speakers, it's one of the highest rates in Europe for childcare. We've constantly been, you know, left behind when we're talking about women and childcare. I remember before I was pregnant, you know, I would have looked into and understood, well, thought I understood a lot of what was going on with how women were being treated by the state. And unfortunately, I didn't have a clue. And, you know, as we are getting a new government, you know, we really need to be campaigning and focusing on publicly funded childcare. You know, we need proper state after school services. We need free childcare before a child is 3. We need paid paternity leave and extended maternity leave, extended paid maternity leave. You know, and it just shows you how little that we have placed on people in society. I was a county councillor when I was pregnant, the county councillor for People Before Profit. And as county councillor, you're not entitled to maternity leave. So we keep hearing other chatter about how we need more women in roles and need, you know, more women in politics. But yet, when you are a woman in politics, you're not entitled to maternity leave. So even from that aspect, we aren't sending the right message out there to people. And like with everything else, the only way that stuff gets changed is from below. We had massive changes to women's rights, north and south, from the repeal campaign. And again, you know, I'll go back to the fact that choice was the main thing in that. So I think if we can get a campaign going, you know, 25,000 women signed Paula's petition, which is unbelievable. And if we can keep that momentum up and get, you know, proper childcare services out there now, while everything is at a standstill and while everything is shut down, you know, let's put our points across of what exactly we want the state to provide in childcare to us. While they're all negotiating for government, let's let them know, you know, we won't be going back to work without proper childcare there for our children. We just won't be able to do it. The same, you know, with people pushing to get the schools open. We can't be pushing for the schools to be open unless there's proper childcare provided as well. You know, so again, I think it's about us continuing to put pressure on this new government, put pressure. At the moment, you know, it's difficult to kind of go out there and protest. Petitions are absolutely fantastic, but it's up to us now to draw up this map of what we actually want from the state and what they should be providing to us.
Okay, Emma, that's excellent. Thanks very much. I do have a couple of questions coming in, but before I call them out, one thing I would like to say following that discussion is that we're talking about a new government, but it hasn't actually been formed yet because the grassroots members haven't agreed to it. So I think from the point of view of Paula's campaign and all of us who support them, we should actually keep the pressure up, particularly on the Green Party, because if they give cover to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, we're getting more of the same. There's no commitment in this programme for government to give us what's needed. The type of childcare system that Stephen talked about is sort of a Scandinavian model, which is something that Catherine Sapone frequently talked about, but was never enacted upon when she was the Minister for Children Affairs. So I think we should keep that pressure up on people like Nasa Work and Patrick Costello and those in the Greens, who did come to the gates actually to meet Paula and the women last Thursday, and we should keep that pressure up on them, because that is what's needed, is an overarching emphasis on childcare, maternity leave, the extension of it, etc., particularly during this crisis. Just to say, I was stunned by a protest march that did happen just before COVID, which was all about childcare. There were something like 20,000, mainly young women, marching through the streets of Dublin, demanding a proper childcare service in the country. And most of them worked in the system, and they weren't being paid properly, not being treated properly. As somebody said, bills come in 52 weeks of the year, you get paid for 30 odd of them. So I have a couple of questions. The first one is, sorry, just go back to it. Do we think that paternity leave should be extended equally in length? Now, I'm assuming that means as in normal times. Yeah. Okay, there it is up on the screen. The system for caring for children is broken. Maternity leave and paternity leave should be of equal length and paid. Women will never achieve equality without it. Parental leave rights should be held by the person. Too much discretion given to employers. Can't access paternity leave for 12 months if you change job. Very few jobs offer flexible conditions, for example, start to finish time. Public service is supposed to, but it's very ad hoc. Does anybody want to come in and comment on that one first? And maybe, this applies both north and south. Stephen, would you like to try and address that one?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you have examples, for example, in Germany, you get 14 months maternity leave, which is shared between both couples. One couple has to have a minimum of 2 months, but it can be shared between both of them. I think that's very important. I mean, in Ireland, I got 2 weeks, I think.
Okay, Ciara, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just going to briefly say that there is in the north, you kind of be able to have shared parental leave, but again, you have the man has to have been in, or the partner has to have been in his or her job for 6 months, and then you can split your leave equally, but it's kind of like subtracted from the woman's maternity leave. So my husband took some shared parental leave. He took 2 months, but that shortened my maternity leave by then my maternity pay by 2 months. So it's a little bit of a step forward, but it's not mandatory, and the take up on it has been very, very, very low.
Okay, so I think we would agree with the sentiments in the question, but I have more questions to get through. For this one, what do you think the role of parent groups in communities is, and how do we think bigger picture to engage those often well-established groups in a national and political campaign? Emma.
What do I think the role of, sorry, Brid, repeat the question?
Yeah, what do we think is the role of parent groups in communities, and how do we think the bigger picture to engage those often well-established groups in a national and political campaign? I think it's basically just parental groups in communities have a role. How can we incorporate them into some kind of a national campaign?
Well, I think that we don't have, there's no provision out there at the moment for under trace. And I know when I became a new mother, parent groups were an absolute lifeline for me. And, you know, it's even just having someone that's not your own mother to ask a question to your peers, and, you know, does your baby do this, does your baby do that? And it's also great social interaction for the children. A lot of them are run privately in community centres, often just by women take it upon themselves, and then one or two of the ones I've seen around the area, they're also in churches. So I think if we really start to push for more provisions for children for under 3, that's where the local parent groups can get involved, because we'd be looking to them for guidance on what supports we will be looking for children under 3, and they've all the experience there.
Very good. Do you want to add anything to that, Paula? Paula, can you hear me?
Sorry.
Okay. Did you want to add anything into what was said there about parental groups and their role in helping to fight this politically? Okay, I'm going to leave that one then, Paula, because I have another couple of questions. And this is obviously from somebody who's in a really catch-22. I'm looking to go back to work, but the creche costs $1,250. I'm earning just over the minimum wage. What the kicker is that I'm an early years worker in a creche. Okay, maybe Paula, you take that one, just to comment on it. That's from Joanne Mullins. Did you hear me, Paula?
Yeah. Sorry, but my computer is just taking an age to unmute there. Yeah, I think that's it. Like, I'm, you know, the creche fees are just incredible. I have 2 kids, and it was slightly improved for me in the last year because my son is started going to school, so he's there before school and after school. But, you know, we get a small allowance for my son Sebastian because he's now in the ECCE. But outside of that, once the summer holidays break, as in from Montessori, like it's a huge cost on our family again. And Quinn, our new baby, he's going to be going into the baby room, and we're talking full fees again, and there's no discount for siblings or anything like that. I think it's incredible for creche workers that they are faced with this when they're on a minimum wage, and they have postgraduate qualifications and everything as well. It's an absolute disgrace that somebody with that kind of educational level is on the minimum wage and doesn't get any of the kind of sick pay benefits or maternity leave benefits, and then they're faced with having to pay those kind of fees when it comes to them wanting to return to work as well. And I often see when creche workers have had their own children that they drop out of the creche and they start working for themselves, maybe in the more informal market or whatever as well. And it's a real shame to lose them really at that, with your kids, because they bond with them at creche as well.
Okay, thank you, Joanne, for the question. That was from Joanne Mullins. We have another question then on an All-Ireland basis. Do you want to put that one up, Shiva? The question is an All-Ireland campaign, like the one for a national NHS North and South. Okay, this is a different one that you're putting up now. Okay, I better go with it. It took me a while to figure out here from Gretti where we leave comments. I want to agree with Ciara about the need for Stormont to move on childcare, but I'm cynical because we've been waiting almost 20 years now for a funded childcare strategy for the North. My question is whether an All-Ireland campaign like the one for an All-Ireland National Health Service would help. Sinn Féin is in government in the North. Will they push as hard up in the North as they do in the South? I think maybe I'll let you in on that one, Ciara. Okay?
Yeah, I think that would be very useful. And I think as I think Gretti's getting there, it would maybe push Sinn Féin to kind of show how dedicated they are to ensuring more leftist policies are implemented, both north and south of the border. At the minute, there's plenty of talk about moving on childcare, but there's been absolutely no action, and there's been no action for 20 years. So it is very easy to be cynical. So I do think that strategically, an All-Ireland campaign for universal childcare would be a very good one.
Very good. I think that's probably something we could discuss going forward, because we do have people involved in campaigns and political representatives north and south. So I think we should take up that discussion. I have a question for you, Stephen. I know you've put a lot of work into the people before profit childcare policy. Do you think it needs to be updated or adjusted in light of the new programme for government, and also in light of what COVID has exposed around the gap that there is for childcare and maternity leave benefits?
Sorry, yes. I think it probably needs to be updated. But I mean, what we were arguing for even prior to COVID was a much higher level investment. The new government, as I mentioned, the new government which may come into being, has put forward a lot of proposals. Some of them have said they're going to put caps on fees, make sure that people don't pay higher fees. But they've also put forward one thing which is useful, which we were also arguing for, which is a single agency. At the moment, creche providers have, they're pulled between 4 different agencies, which pull them in all sorts of directions. But as I say, none of these things can actually come into effect unless you invest in the area. I mean, and with there's talk about the finances being in dire, in a dire state at the moment because of the high levels of unemployment, because of the lack of taxation, etc. And it's not clear whether they will invest any money in the childcare sector. I don't see it as being a priority. As I said, because it's a very gendered area, it's still seen, hopefully women can take care of this, or grandparents can take care of this. But it's not something that they're taking seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I suppose we have kind of left parents and grandparents out of this story because they've provided a huge amount of the childcare in this country traditionally. In fact, I think it was last year, there was a study done among grandparents who are childminding, and the study exposed a huge level of depression and isolation among that cohort because they were at a stage in their life where they'd reared their families, had hoped to sort of sit back and relax and do stuff that they wanted to do, but find themselves out of necessity practically rearing the next generation as well. So it does have a major impact on the whole of society. And indeed, then there's the children themselves who aren't getting the justified service that they should be entitled to. So there's a lot of work to be done on it, and I'm delighted we had this discussion. Is there any comments from anybody before I close up? Because we're now in an hour and almost 10 minutes, and just unless you want to keep going, if there's final comments, then I'll bring it to a close. Emma, would you like to finally say anything, or Ciara or Paula?
I would just like to say that I think it's now's the time for us to be pushing for this, for the type of childcare that we want, and now's the time to be reaching out to other mothers in our communities, to our friends, and saying to them, come on, let's get on board, and let's push for the childcare that we deserve in Ireland. Let's not be leaving children behind, and by doing that extension leaving women behind. So I just think that if people have different groups that they're involved in, it'd be great to raise some conversations at them. I will be raised we've been doing our mother and baby group on Zoom at the moment, and I will be raising it. So I just think now's the time to be pushing for a campaign.
I agree. So I think that we should all try and pull this together over the next few weeks. I just want to finish by saying, because I think in many ways, Paula, your group have inspired us to have this meeting because of the focus that was on the the petition and the campaign to push for the extension of maternity leave, and there's a huge amount of support and sympathy out there for you. So I don't think we should give up on it. I think if we can get Leo Varadkar bombarded with emails from individual women and groups saying you haven't answered Deputy Smith's request that you look into the extension of maternity leave and benefit. Will you please give us an answer? The clock is ticking. We're frightened. We have to face the prospect of going back to work. And for all the many reasons that you've so well articulated, I think it would be good to keep on the pressure. And I'll circulate this to you and to all the women, Agnes and all the women whom I'm in touch with on email. I'll circulate this answer from Charlie Flanagan, but it's not sufficient, and we do have to keep on Leo Varadkar while he's still Taoiseach. But also I think the wider discussion about campaigning around childcare, the rights of mothers, childcare, maternity leave and paternity leave is something we need to look at. So I think we'll come back and we'll revisit this again. Anybody out there who's watching and who wants to get involved, please do get onto our website, peoplebeforeprofit.ie. You can join, you can check out the childcare policy, or you can just leave a sentiment of interest, and we'd be very happy to get back to you and work with you. I think I have left one thing out, and that was a comment that came in from London. Shiva, do you want to put that back up on the screen, just so we acknowledge that comment from somebody in London who's been watching us? Can we do that now? Okay, so from Brian Christopher, we're facing similar issues over the water. I'm in London. Massive cost to send a child to nursery, as much as 12,000 quid for us, but low paid staff and badly run private nurseries. We've set up a parent group after the regulator gave a rating of inadequate to our nursery. The question is, what do you all think is the role of parent groups in communities? That's what the question was, yeah. Okay, so these comments are interesting because I've also received loads of emails from people in the UK who said, similar to Paula's group and their petition, they're pushing for an extension of maternity leave and benefits for the period of COVID. We keep pushing at it, we keep raising it, and thank you all again very, very much for joining us tonight. It was really interesting meeting, learned loads from it, and I hope everybody out there who's watching also learned from it. And please do get in touch with us at People Before Profit. We'd be delighted to knit together a group of parents and concerned citizens, mothers, fathers, everybody who want to campaign with us north and south for a proper universal properly funded childcare system. Thanks very much. Best of luck. Bye-bye.